Today is March 18th, 2022. My name is Charles Suter. Today I'm presenting the topic, the good death. My main message, a good life is normally followed by a good death. Everyone wants to live a good life, but few people think about the possibilities of dying a good death. Death is something people prefer not to think about, but sooner or later everyone must die. And there are better ways to conclude one's life after a good life. With a good death, a journey into the unknown, living fully until the end, pain-free, with dignity, and anticipation of what awaits beyond life. Except for cases of sudden death, people can control the process of dying due to old age or disease, making advance arrangements based on knowing the best practices of death and dying, and personally scripting the end of life. The first prerequisite to a good death is to live fully while you are still alive so you have no regrets at the end. Live your life with closure, without unfinished business, regrets, or broken relationships. Attempt to create a personal legacy where you can transfer your wit and wisdom or something to be remembered by to the next generation. Prepare to transfer all personal treasures during your life and assets on death to the next generation. A person who has lived his life well has less to fear when his time comes to exit this life and the journey to the next. So the best preparation for a good death is to live a good life, one without regrets, without unfinished business and unresolved grievances. At the end of life, it may be too late to make amends and apologize for what one should have done but didn't, and what one did but shouldn't. Besides supporting a good death, a life well lived is normally lived in good health, vitality, and longevity. So the best way to prepare for death is to live each day well, according to one's values and preferences, with a minimum of regrets. Second prerequisite to a good death, pain-free at the end of life. Pain is an unnecessary part of dying, and suffering must be minimized. If you have caregivers, they must strive to provide a continuing quality of life pain-free until the end. Now, professional caregivers should offer emotional support, comfort, and familiarity. Dying may mean losing mental and physical faculties, but your attitude and your dignity are still under your control and need not be lost. People don't fear death so much as they fear pain, suffering, and regrets. When the point is reached that wellness is unattainable due to limits of medical science, further attempts at treatment and cure must transition to self-healing. And if that is not possible, then palliative care and preparation for death. From this point forward to the end of life, a person's focus should shift to maximizing the quality of their remaining time here on earth, settling one's affairs, saying and doing what still needs to be done, handing over all personal assets to the next generation, and actively managing and experiencing the process of dying. In the final days, the caregivers must be the dying person and make them as comfortable as possible with access to anything pleasurable. That includes pain-relieving drugs, and of course, continuous access to family and loved ones. The dying person might consider keeping a daily record of their final days, perhaps with a diary, noting observations, insights, and unusual experiences such as dreams, premonitions, and hallucinations. These recordings during the last days of life would be useful not only to the family, but for future research in the dying process. Third prerequisite to a good death, having family, caregivers, and spiritual support that are necessary at the end of life. At the end of life, hospice or specialized caregivers ought to be present because they're trained to give palliative care. Continue to maintain contact with family, friends, and familiar sources of comfort. Encourage full engagement in all spiritual hallucinations and altered consciousness that are likely to occur at the end. Embrace death as the start of the next great experience. At the very end of the dying process is death of the body, where the conscious mind ends and the soul departs the body for places unknown. At the end of life, the dying person begins to slip progressively into longer and more frequent unconsciousness sleep states with vivid dreams and hallucinations, imagining incidents with people and situations from their past. This is a key transition point between life in the body ending and life out of the body beginning. This portal or gateway into close-to-death experiences is the only way to gain insights as to what awaits us all at the end. An enlightened researcher or persons of ministry would do well to be present at as a person begins to take his last breaths, to observe, to listen, and if possible, inquire about a dying person's experiences in his final days. In the final days and moments before death, this is the best time to learn not only about the process of dying, but what might lie on the other side of death. These insights might help the human race in their quest to understand the spiritual universe so they can both live and die better. My final message: it is best to die knowing you lived a full life and having completed your purpose. Death need not be feared as a terrible thing, even though death is the last act that everyone must complete before one's time here on earth is done. When death is necessary, it need not be a time of suffering and anguish. Death can be made into one's last and greatest triumph if it's done right. If one's life has been lived right, there will be less that must be done to arrange for a good death at the end. Everything else necessary to achieve a good death can be provided by medical science. Grief counselors, family, professional caregivers, and of course one's own attitude going into the last chapter of one's life. Everyone enters life not knowing where they came from, not knowing when and how they will die, and not knowing what comes next. Each of us exits this life. We should strive to face death as a celebration and a good ending to a well-lived life. That's all for now. Remember to stay positive. You'll be happier, healthier, and live longer.